Have you ever had someone ask you, how do you put up with that? And you didn't even know how to answer? Today, we're talking about something that happens slowly, quietly, often without you realizing it. It's when abuse becomes normal and how you can actually become conditioned to tolerate it. And when somebody finally notices, when they ask you that question, it can stir up a mix of emotions. There might be a certain relief, like, thank God somebody sees it. It's a form of validation that maybe you didn't even know you needed. And alongside that is a very different feeling, almost a wave of shame, because now you're realizing that you put up with it, that somehow without your even knowing it, you accepted something harmful as your normal. If you've ever felt both of those things at once, stay with me on this episode because we're going to dive into when abuse becomes normal and how you become conditioned to tolerate it. Sometimes the hardest part about narcissistic abuse is realizing the abuse, seeing it, because once you start to recognize the patterns, you start to see your life differently. You might look back at conversations you thought were normal and feel a wave of grief. You might hear a friend's concern and finally start to believe it, realizing that what you have been going through isn't normal, and it triggers the question for you, how did I not see it? The answer, because you were conditioned, and conditioning doesn't happen overnight. It happens slowly through repetition, reinforcement, silence, and survival. You learned what keeps the peace. You learned what sparks anger. You learned how to manage the other person's moods, how to avoid conflict, and how to keep your own emotions tucked away so they don't get used against you. And if that's all you've known, whether it's in your family growing up or in a relationship entered into too young, you don't have a blueprint for what a healthy relationship looks like. So what do? You adapt, not because you're weak, but because you are strong, strong enough to survive what you couldn't yet put a name to. Now, this is a part that gets overlooked. You don't realize you've been conditioned until someone reflects it back to you. A friend might say, that's not normal. You pause because deep down, you know something is felt off, but you've been so busy managing it, surviving it, escaping it, that you haven't had time to understand it. The truth is, when it's all you've ever known, it doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like your life, like your relationship. It's your normal. So what does it mean to say you've been conditioned? We're talking about how people adapt to unsafe dynamics without even knowing it. Let me be clear. When I talk about being conditioned to tolerate abuse, I'm not talking about weakness. I'm talking about survival. Let's say you grew up in a family where you were taught to keep your emotions to yourself. You were afraid to speak up. Or you got married so young before you even knew who you really are, or before you learned what love at least isn't supposed to be. It's possible you adjusted to someone else's version of reality, to their rules, their moods, their version of the truth. At first, it doesn't feel like abuse. It feels like compromise. It feels like just how relationships are. And before you realize it, you've been trained to tolerate what you should have never had to deal with. Then when somebody notices, when they say, how do you live like that? It does rattle something loose, because the truth is, you didn't know. You thought this is what a relationship looked like. That moment, regardless of when it happens into the relationship, it is the beginning of change. It doesn't mean necessarily you're ready to leave the relationship, but it does mean you're starting to wake up. You're starting to trust your own discomfort. You're starting to wonder what it would be like not to be afraid of upsetting someone. You start to realize you've been surviving something that no one should have to survive. And that awareness is where your healing begins, even if you're still in it. even if you're not sure what comes next. So, what you're sitting with is a reality that you've tolerated too much for too long. Please know this. You're not behind, and you're certainly not broken. You adapted because you had to. You minimized things because you were just trying to stay safe. You kept going because you were strong. And now you're starting to see it. And once you do, you can't unsee it. That's where everything shifts. Not because somebody rescued you, but because you finally started to believe in yourself. At that moment of recognition, that's when your normal starts to feel unacceptable. It's a moment everything can begin to change. Once you say, this isn't normal, you can begin to rebuild what's true. You don't have to rush. You don't have to explain. You just have to trust that if it hurt you, confused you, made you feel smaller, it wasn't love. It isn't love. Realize you were strong enough to survive what you didn't understand. And it's just not the way things are. It is abuse. If any part of this episode feels familiar, if you've ever started to wonder whether you've been conditioned to tolerate too much, I want you to know that wondering is valid. It's the beginning of something powerful. Feel free to share your story in the comments or just let me know if this spoke to you. You don't have to explain. Sometimes just saying, I am Annie, is enough. And if you know someone who might be quietly questioning their normal, maybe you might want to send this their way, because sometimes one moment of recognition is all it takes to start a new path. Now, for those of you new to my podcast, I'm Kyle Hackley, attorney and author of Undercurrent, a story about Annie who breaks free from a narcissistic marriage. Annie isn't just one person. She is anyone, male or female, who has ever experienced narcissistic abuse. And Are You Annie is a space to validate you, to hear you, and to walk this healing journey with you. You're not alone here. And I want you to remember that you are stronger than you think, that you are a warrior against narcissistic abuse, and I want you to be tenacious and never give up on what's important to you. Thank you so much for walking this journey with me, and I will see you next time. Thank you.